everyone, welcome to a very special virtual event. My name is Susie and I'm from Macquarie Regional Library in Dubbo. We're going to be learning about Threatened Species Week today, and we're going to be joined in just a moment by David Coote, who is the Threatened Species Officer here in Dubbo, and also local author Pat Clarke, who's going to be doing a reading from her book, The Magic Forest of Goonoo. So I hope you'll enjoy learning some more about Threatened Species Week and why it's really important, and have some fun listening to this great story.
So Threatened Species Day commemorates the passing of the very last Tasmanian tiger, or thylacine, and that died in Hobart Zoo in 1936. And Threatened Species Day is turned into Threatened Species Week and almost Threatened Species Month, is commemorated on the 7th of September. So why is it important? So we're not only commemorating the loss of this pretty amazing animal, the Tasmanian tiger. So it's a little bit sad, but we're also reminding everyone that we don't want to lose any more. And so why is Threatened Species Day or Week important? Every species is unique, and so if you lose it, you can't replace it. But if you also think of species as the building blocks of nature, then you think of nature as a house that everybody in the world lives in. And if you remove a brick from that house, probably it's not going to make that much of a difference. Maybe 2, 3, even 10 bricks might not have that much of an impact. But if you keep removing bricks, then eventually you might lose a wall or a window or a floor, and eventually the roof might cave in. So it's really important to appreciate what's out there and to do our best to conserve it and keep it. So species become extinct through or threatened. So when a species is threatened, it means it's getting closer to extinction. So species become extinct, they might be hunted. So the thylacine is, or the Tasmanian tiger was a good example. They were hunted because they were seen as a pest. They were eating the farmers' sheep in Tasmania. Species might get eaten by foxes and cats. So foxes and cats were introduced to Australia when the Europeans came to Australia. Or they might get eaten because they're plants. So things like rabbits and goats, which were also introduced. Or simply species might lose their homes. So you have species that rely on tree hollows. Tree hollows take an awfully long time, hundreds of years to grow. And that's where possums and parrots and big lizards live. But if you take away the trees that have the hollows, then those homes are gone. Smaller animals simply need places to hide. So removing that habitat can cause them to become threatened. Look, there certainly are threatened species in the Dubbo area, the broader area, and if you're lucky enough, you can see them. If you're riding your bike up towards a zoo, you might see a grey-crowned babbler, which is pretty amazing. There's a threatened bird right there. So Pat's book talks about the magical forest of Goonoo, and that's chockers with threatened species. So things like the malleefowl, which is a really special bird. It's about the size, a little bit bigger than a chicken, and pairs. What the amazing thing they do is they build a mound of leaf litter, huge mound, 3 meters wide. And that leaf litter then rots down, and that rotting creates heat, which incubates the eggs and helps hatch the malleefowl eggs, just the same as a chicken would sit on an egg and use its body heat to hatch their chicks. There's things like the glossy black cockatoo, a large black glossy cockatoo that eats the seeds of the she oaks. Squirrel gliders that have a flap of skin from their wrist through to their ankle, and they're able to glide enormous distances. So if you're standing at the 100 metre straight on the athletics track here in Dubbo and you look down, a glider with the right conditions, can glide from one tree to the next, almost that full distance, which is quite amazing. But there's plenty of other native plants and animals that are really easy to see around Dubbo. They're not just see, but also hear. Lots of different species of frogs and lizards and birds and insects, spiders if they're not too scary, even snakes, and kangaroos, platypus and water rats. There are even species that have gone extinct from the Dubbo area, things like the bilby and the brush-tailed bettong, which is possibly the cutest animal you'll ever see. But one of the things that I do, part of the program that I work with, is they're reintroducing those extinct mammals, because they still occur in little areas in parts of Australia, and they're releasing them into places like the Pilliga Forest near the Warrumbungles. And so they've built these big predator-proof fences where the foxes and cats can't get them. And the idea is that you release them, they grow up, and then eventually that they can then start repopulating the Pilliga Forest, which is pretty exciting. So I think one of the greatest things that kids can do is to learn about biodiversity and the environment and threatened species, and then that gives you an appreciation and a lifelong interest in them. One of the best ways is to read books like Pat's book. Come to the library, check out all the books that they have about nature and different species, and watch shows. When I was a kid, I watched David Attenborough and Harry Butler. Now, I don't know if you children are familiar with those guys, but today you've got like awesome guys like Steve Backshall, what a legend, Deadly 60. He goes around adventuring. I don't quite do that. I do a little bit of adventuring, not quite as cool as Steve Backshall, as my children remind me. But that's how you get a lifelong interest in it. See how many different animals and plants you can list in your backyard. Keep a list, bring it in, show your classmates, show your teacher. And another way, which is fairly new but really powerful, is every one of us can be a scientist, or what we like to call a citizen scientist. So you can help people like me, help people like Taronga and the Australian Museum. One app that you could download on your tablet or your mum and dad's phone is Frog ID, and we can provide the details for that. And what you do is you hold your phone up to or near a frog, you record the call, that call's then sent to the Australian Museum, and the Australian Museum will get back to you and say, these are the frogs that are in your backyard. And you can see how the different frogs in different times of the year become active, and that's really, really useful information for people like me who need to know where these species are and how best to look after them.
Well, I hope you enjoyed learning some really great information about the threatened species in our area from David. Don't forget to check out some of the resources that we have available here at the library, such as this book here, Amazing Animals in Our National Parks. So that's got some great information about threatened species and some of the endangered species in our area. Now we'll be switching to Pat Clarke for the Magic Forest of Goonoo.
It was an inquisitive magpie that first raised the alarm. She'd been idly sticky-beaking, just watching some campers light a small fire and cook breakfast. Maybe she could scrounge a bit of toast or bacon. Maggie Magpie flew in a bit closer and landed on the roof of a small truck parked in the bushes. Now she was closer to the campfire and in a better position to swoop down quickly if any food was on offer. From her perch, Maggie looked down into the truck. She gasped in horror. There were all kinds of cages, big and small, with nasty-looking animal traps and snares stacked in rows. She also saw sacks of birdseed tins marked poison, and even some rifles and ammunition. These were no ordinary campers, she realised. These were trappers. I must warn everyone at once. As she was about to fly off, she noticed a big greasy chunk of bacon on the ground. Maggie loved bacon. While the trappers had their backs turned, she swooped down and picked up the tasty morsel. But she hadn't seen the big dogs beside the truck. One seemed to come from nowhere, snapping and snarling at this cheeky black and white bird stealing his food. As she flew off with her prize, the dog lunged and snapped at her, but only managed to get hold of a tail feather, which he spat out in disgust. He received a kick from one of the trappers for making such a racket, and he slunk away to his spot beside the truck, vowing revenge on all magpies should he ever get the chance. Maggie's flight was rather wobbly, as it was very hard to steer properly without her best tail feather. She stopped at the nearest waterhole, where a family of popplebonk frogs was lazing around in the mud, their mottled bellies full of juicy insects. They were just the ones to sound the warning. Their loud bonk, bonk, bonk call could be heard throughout the forest. Word soon spread about the intruders. King Parrot called a meeting of all the birds and animals and asked for suggestions. There was so much noise with everyone talking at once, he could hardly be heard. "Order, order," he shouted. "We can dive bomb them," squawked the magpies. "That's too dangerous," said King Parrot. "Don't forget these trappers have guns. We can't risk it. Any other ideas?" The noise became louder as everybody argued over what to do. Suddenly a terrifying scream cut the air, scaring the daylights out of the crowd. It came from a large brown owl with big yellow eyes and feet. It was Rover the barking owl, who flew down and landed on a tree stump. Rover was a rare type of owl who lived deep in the forest. He kept very much to himself, so not many had ever met him. They knew he could snarl, growl and bark just like a dog, and was known to be very wise. They listened carefully to his advice. Rover's yellow eyes burned bright as he solemnly addressed the worried crowd. "You may think we should just hide and wait for the trappers to go away," he said. "But we can't do that forever. We need to get food and drink, tend to our babies, build nests and burrows, and go about our normal lives without fear of being captured." "Hear, hear," nodded the birds and animals. "If we all work together, we may be able to chase the trappers out of the forest. Let's make sure they leave empty-handed and make them so uncomfortable they won't ever return."
Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. I hope you had a great time listening to our story and learning some great facts about threatened species. If you did want to borrow Pat's book, The Magic Forest of Goonoo, or even borrow some books about the threatened species in our area or any other areas around Australia, then please head down to Macquarie Regional Library and ask the friendly staff.